Good, excellent. Because we're going to upload the video. All the sessions will be on our YouTube channel soon. And so today we're going to receive Professor Paola Leone. It's a great pleasure to have her here. Thank you, Paola, for accepting to be our keynote speaker this morning. I'm going to introduce her to you, and then we're going to have 1 hour and 15 minutes for her talk, and then the questions and answer session. Professor Paola Leone is a professor tenure track of second language acquisition and language teaching methodology at the University of Salento, Italy. She has participated in research projects funded by institutions such as the European Union and the Italian Ministry of Education. She has published research on the vocabulary of history textbooks, language learning, and native, non-native computer-mediated oral interaction. In this latter field, she presented at international conferences and published on international journals papers on meaning negotiation, sequences of repair, interactional dominance, the use of discourse markers in face-to-face and computer-mediated communication. She has been carrying out research on Teletandem since 2009. Please welcome Professor Paola Leone. And please, you can use the chat for comments, and then we're going to have this discussion after her talk. Paola, I think your microphone is closed. Yeah.
Okay. Is it working now?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Good morning to you all, and good morning to all those who are now in Western Europe. I'm thankful to the organizers for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here with you all in this technology-mediated environment. In the past, I missed InFlint and other conferences organized by our Teletandem network because they were held too far away for me. The mobility crisis, quoting Dr. Cunningham, caused by COVID-19, which forces us to use technologies and talk with you via internet, has been maybe an opportunity for some of us. Think positive. Thank you to all of you who are doing a really great job in organizing such an interesting event in which technologies are reliable and well managed. A few words also to João Teles, that I didn't think he was going to be here, to whom I am grateful. When he first talked to me about Teletandem, he showed me a field of research, a teaching context, a new teaching perspective. Furthermore, he introduced me to a team of colleagues, some of which have become also friends, with whom I can work hard, having fun and enjoying our research. So thank you very much, João, for all of this. And thanks to our Teletandem network, which is promoting research in this field. Well, let's start our talk, which I hope will be also an opportunity for discussion for all of us. Now I share the screen. Okay. No. Can you hear me? Is everything okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes, it works perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, I will talk about teletandem and intercomprehension. Aims of my talk is to show a fairly recent teletandem project named IOTT, which is a teletandem plus intercomprehension approach. I will describe this concept later. I will describe also how teletandem can become an interesting learning experience for developing metacommunicative skills and an attitude towards research in preliminary teacher training. I will discuss why IOTT, this teletandem plus intercomprehension learning scenario, has been included in my course in second language acquisition and teaching methodology. Outline, I will explain the notion of intercomprehension. I'm sure that some of you are already familiar with this notion. I will describe the pedagogical design of a teletandem-based learning scenario. That's how Aranha and Leone, Solange and I called it in a paper we published in 2017. I'm sure that Solange will explain this concept in her talk. And I will also describe tasks and a task named MINT, mediation, intercomprehension, negotiation, and teletandem. Tasks and activities that compose, that realize this pedagogical scenario. Well, intercomprehension, what is it? Intercomprehension, is exactly what we have done a few minutes ago. Intercomprehension is a communication process, it's a communication practice when someone understands a person who speaks, writes in another language. That is a language related to one's home language. So when we speak French and when we speak Italian with a French speaker and he speaks his own language, we are doing intercomprehension. And intercomprehension implies also that each person must be understood, must try to be clear and be understood by him or her in his own language. Intercomprehension, as we can imagine from our experience, is strongly related to the notion of mediation. Mediation, we have been talking about this also during this conference, is a language activity essential nowadays. Because mediation as the Common European Framework says, mediation makes communication possible between persons who are unable, for whatever reason, to communicate with each other directly. So mediation helps to construct or convey meaning and creates bridges. So it's a way for connecting. It's a strategy to make people construct and convey meanings. Why intercomprehension? Why did I choose to institutionalize a teletandem intercomprehension? And why did I choose intercomprehension for my course? First, intercomprehension is an ethical approach. Michael was saying something about using different languages, the use of English and so on. It's an ethical approach that means that it's in service of social inclusion and global citizenship. So all languages are important. We are all the same. Okay, let's see. Social inclusion. People often say that English is an international language. Nowadays, is it actually true? Or we are just thinking of a privileged people in our societies? Does a Brazilian or an Italian taxi driver speak English? Becoming a global citizen doesn't mean to use just one language, but to be plurilingual, also in defense of minority languages, which highlight the diversity and the richness of our world. Many less used, less learned languages are in danger because more powerful languages are being used, among which the language I'm using now. The languages we know are the basis for understanding a new related language, so we can actually enrich our repertoire by practicing receptive skills in an L2. Intercomprehension as a daily practice. My colleague Sandra Garbarina in 2015 made a survey among her students, and she asked, Sandra Garbarino, she teaches an intercomprehension course at the University of Lyon 2, and she asked her students if they were actually used to read different languages for the ones that they know and they had studied, and particularly she asked if they had read text in languages that they didn't know. And many of them, they answered they actually were exposed to different languages, and they have actually had to construct meanings from text written in languages different from the ones they studied. So writing some fruit choice boxes plus sample everyday product. On everyday products, we usually find writings in different languages. During school trips, they have met friends who didn't speak their languages. In certain specific research fields, some texts are written in different languages. You must read different languages because they are not translated in English, for instance. Anthropology is one of these fields. The vision of English only discriminates on grounds of language, the reader and the writer of scientific texts. So this is again something that is related to our the ethic approach. Okay, we all speak, must be used to use different languages, and we do this because actually, that's what we do. We use different languages. So multilingual interaction, that's our practice works, challenges a common misconception that communication, in order to be efficient, or to promote equality between speakers, should be monolingual. This is a quotation from Melo Pfeiffer, who has been doing research in the intercomprehension field for many years. And this is also another concept that I like, is that intercomprehension allows to manage word super diversity. That is, the word is super diverse. So we all have to learn how to manage this super diversity. Okay, so seeing these principles in the middle of 90s in Europe, started this pedagogical approach named intercomprehension. It is one of the 4 pluralistic approaches to language and cultures, and it is well described in this framework of reference for pluralistic approach to languages and cultures that has been published in 2011. A pluralistic approach are contrasted to singular approaches in which teaching aims at developing competencies just in one language or in a particular culture considered in isolation. These are singular approaches, are those approaches that exclude the use of L1, for instance, in a language classroom, or are those approaches in which just focus on a variety of language, what we were saying yesterday about accents and pronunciation and this idea of native speakers. So just the idea of a language is the prototypical native language, and not considering all different language varieties. Okay, intercomprehension approach develops partial competence, so you in more than one language, and the ability to manage communicative events in which more than one language is used. So this implies to negotiate meanings and to solve communicative problems. And normally several languages of the same linguistic family are studied. For instance, in this EUROM 5 book, that is a book used at the University of Roma 3, students develop their receptive skills, reading skills, in 5 Romance languages. They are all Italian speakers, and they develop skills in reading Portuguese, Espanol, Catalan, Italiano, and Francese. Intercomprehension project. So I'm talking about intercomprehension. I'm quite new compared to others, because there are people who have been working for at least, there are people who have been working for at least 20 years, nearly 30 years in this research field. And we have also people coming, not only people from Europe, but also people from South America, Argentina, or also Brazil. So these are the logos of many projects which have been carried out. And I participated to myriad, thanks to which an association for intercomprehension was created, and I participated also to Lecturio Plus, the university, for developing intercomprehension skills in primary schools. It's a little bit what also Maisa is doing with her daughters. She is teaching some Italian songs and also how to understand words in other languages. IOTT, Intercompréhension Orale, can also be named in French, Intercompréhension Orale et Teletandem, is based on 2 speakers. Is carried out by during Teletandem sessions, 2 speakers of different languages. Each student has a low or no competence in his or partner's L1. It's different from Teletandem alternate monolingualism. Speakers speak alternatively in the L1 and the L2. That's the traditional Teletandem, the Vassallo and Teletandem, and what we all know as our tradition. IOTT floats one of the original Teletandem principles, the development of the principle is not mixture of 2 languages principle, and we see how this principle has been developed during years. I quote some papers, some references related to Teletandem. Teles and Vassallo in 2006 talk about autonomy, reciprocity, and non-mixture of the two languages as the three principles for Teletandem. ITandem, O'Dowd mentions in the introduction to the OIE book, Online Intercultural Exchange, in which a paper Leone and Teles published in 2016 was included. He says, he talks about the principle, when he talks about Teletandem, he talks about the principles of autonomy and reciprocity, and the responsibility for its successful exchange generally rests with the learners. We see that Teletandem has become something different recently, and has also included English as a lingua franca, as vehicle for communication, and also intercomprehension ability, so talk in intercomprehension context. So this principle has changed recently, and we still talk about Teletandem, but we will say, if we all agree about this. João and I, we had to discuss a lot before deciding that I could call Teletandem. Okay. Teletandem in comprehension is then based on the development of oral skills in L2. There are different studies, different experiences, teaching experiences, oral intercomprehension in classroom context. These are the courses given at the University of Lyon, experiences in EU projects, as those already mentioned, Intermar, Prefic, Mediated, and so on. Oral interaction in presenza, in which many speakers are involved. Piccoli made a research about this, telling us which are the strategies implied for mediating. And studies on receptive skills. Jamet and Velasquez, they work a lot on reception skills. Concerning oral intercomprehension and interaction, this is a quite new field. I wrote a paper in 2015, Velasquez wrote in 2018, and there is a paper coming out by Garberino and Leone. What I must tell you is that it is a quite developed field. There are also assessment grids for evaluating students and their intercomprehension strategies. And these are good references also for us. IOTT in numbers. Okay, in my university, IOTT is participation in IOTT, in my course, participation in IOTT is on voluntary basis. So my course, in my course, there are about 30 students, and 22 asked this year to join IOTT. Okay, to make this Teletandem experience and practice also intercomprehension. As you see, the number is growing, and many students are now interested in this program. And the number grows also in Lyon 2, that's our partner university. And at Lyon 2, the IOTT is institutionalized, is integrated, to mention also Aranha and Cavallari, integrated in a course of intercomprehension, and it is a second level course of intercomprehension. It is an advanced course of intercomprehension. Two different learning scenarios. We have two different learning scenarios. We have an international level, as in all Teletandem projects, we have an international level which we share some materials and suggestions, but we also local level of, in the local level, the learning scenarios are different because students are different. Students have a different background. My students take a master course in languages, so they are specialists in languages. Lyon 2 students, they are not specialists, they are students of different subjects. Different languages are involved. I'm just mentioning what we did last year because we are now preparing everything for this year. We had Italian, French, Italian, Spanish, Italian, all these were the Italian, Portuguese, French and Portuguese, and we also had Italian and Corse, a language spoken in Corsica. Okay, who participated to IOTT? Salento plus Lyon 2 students, other university. We are thankful to UNESCO and to Miami, who asked their students to join the Teletandem project. Friends of friends, so people who were not in an institution asked to join the program. So this means that it's also a way out for lifelong learning. Who are our students? Students take a course and they are enrolled in an MI course for initial teacher training in education. Technology resources used. We have this platform that is inside the Myriadi website. The Myriadi is a website that has been developed after a project financed by the European Union. In this section, students communicate using forums. Activity and tasks in IOTT. What do the students do? Students have to answer an initial and a final questionnaire, carry out tasks during Teletandem Oral Sessions, write learner diaries after each Teletandem session. They are asked to report feelings and to reflect upon communication strategies, but in a general way. Then I'll show what they do, because then they do something more specific when they study the theoretical framework for analyzing sequences of mediation, negotiation for meanings. The theoretical framework is Lina et al. Because and Baronis and Gas, because students have also to develop knowledge for metacommunicative analysis. It's not a language course, it's a course for teaching, for learning how to teach. Then they have to analyze and discuss their Teletandem session. Students transcribe video recordings of selected mediation sessions, and they focus on communication strategies, particularly on mediation sequences, negotiation for meanings, in which concepts are explained and clarified. So the oral session, during Teletandem oral sessions, what students do, they carry out different tasks that normally are information gap activities. We all know probably these tasks are map task or problem solving. They have a text, they have a problem to resolve. And and they are in the first meeting, they just discuss hobbies using pictures, and they describe their towns. They also have, as we said, to write learner diaries and then the analysis of interaction. This is how the first section appears to students. So they have to this is the sequence of what they have to do. And this kind of mediate task and activities, I called it in a paper I published in 2018. I called it mediation, interaction, negotiation in Teletandem, because this is something I'm interested to work out in, also in traditional Teletandem, in alternate monolingual Teletandem. So what do students do? They interact. They interact synchronous and asynchronous communication. They reflect, they write diaries, they study the theoretical framework, and then they analyze. I will just explore data to show how students perceive IOTT and why IOTT is important in a course of initial teacher training, because I show what students actually do. Data in diaries. This is what a student says. Ancora una volta avevo la sensazione che la conversazione fosse molto naturale, a volte quasi dimenticando che stessimo parlando effettivamente due lingue diverse. And once again, it seemed to me that the conversation was smooth. Sometimes I forgot we were speaking two different languages. Two languages, one communication process. This is interesting. È stata un'esperienza che non solo mi ha fatto capire bla bla bla, la multimodalità per aiutare a far comprendere il nostro messaggio all'altro interlocutore. Si possono creare amicizie che vanno al di là dei limiti spaziali, culturali e linguistici. To help, I did really like how this was said, to help your interlocutor understand your message. This is very interesting because the speaker helps the interlocutor to understand. And this happens actually in intercomprehension processes where there is not an expert in one language. In native, non-native expert, there is all, in native, non-native talk, there is always one who is expert and who feels that he knows, since he knows the language, he doesn't have to make many efforts to be understood. If he's not understood, it's because the others doesn't have enough competencies. So it's the participation in interaction is in native, non-native speaker interaction is often unbalanced. But in intercomprehension, it works differently, and partners actually want to be understood, want to find linguistic and non-linguistic strategies in order to convey meanings and construct meanings together with their partner. I will show you just one of the sequence, one negotiation of meaning that has been selected by our students. They are, as you can see from the transcription, come hai visto gesticolo molto da italiano, quindi gli stereotipi sono veritieri. Alors je ne suis pas sûre d'avoir compris la dernière phrase. You can see that the interlocutor just wants to focus on the problem. No? He says, I'm not sure that I think I did understand the last sentence you said. So he tries to, she points on what is not clear. Let me show you how also is the atmosphere between these two speakers.
Come hai visto, gesticolo molto da italiano. Quindi gli stereotipi sono veritieri.
Alors, je suis pas sûre d'avoir compris la dernière phrase.
Ah, ok, ripeto. Come si dice, come noi italiani gesticoliamo, usiamo molto queste espressioni.
D'accord, c'est parfait pour moi.
È vero.
Ok. Okay. So as you can see, they explain using words, but using words, but of paraphrasing, but also gestures. Okay, what students do? They make an analysis. Okay, analyzing, mediation sequences. This is an example. These are the questions that I make to students. And please describe features of mediation, negotiation for meaning. Quali problemi si evidenziano? Which are the communication problems? Ci sono impliciti culturali resi espliciti nel corso della negoziazione? In che modo? Is there any specific cultural knowledge that has been explained? If yes, how? Which is the relation between indicator and trigger? This is a terminology that comes out from Varanisegas model. Have communication problems been solved? If yes, how? Has the problem resolution been highlighted? If yes, how? And this is more an analysis done by Antonio, in which he shows knowledge of the model, or the Varanisegas model, this analysis could have been more detailed, but students, as we said also yesterday, sometimes if students, the outcome, if we are not happy with the outcome, this implies that we need to improve our learning scenario. So analyzing this data helps me to implement the learning scenario and improve it. Apart from this, there are also some guiding questions for self-assessment, which is in progress. I have the link here, but I don't know if there is time now to see it. It's in Italian. We can have a look during discussion. Okay, just some conclusions. IOTT aims at overcoming the mixed conception. If you don't know the language spoken by your interlocutors, then you cannot communicate. Gaining a deeper understanding of different languages and cultures, which is the key to teaching in a globalized world and to be a more inclusive future. IOTT aims as well at improving mediation skills, improving students' reflectivity, encouraging formative critical thinking propensity, and IOTT aims as well at developing organizational and digital skills. Intercomprehension is a very rich research field. Teletandem is a very rich research field, and IOTT opens a new perspective to Teletandem learning scenarios, and Teletandem opens as well new perspective to intercomprehension, because it allows students to develop the abilities to communicate. And this field seems to be of interest also for funds, because a project has been funded recently. The name is Comunicar. And so we will have at University of Salento a 3-year research assistant, which will work with this project named Comunicart, that is for developing Teletandem for people who work in restaurants, tourists, and who want to develop competencies in English as a lingua franca, as well in intercomprehension. So it's becoming more and more important. Thank you very much for your attention. These are my references.
Thank you so much, Paola, for this wonderful talk this morning. It's very inspiring and very interesting to know the perspective that you are working with. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions. So if you can, if you want to talk, just unmute your microphone and feel free to participate in the debate. I already have a question that was sent here, but if anybody else wants to, I can see the chat here now. I was following, but now I have more questions here. So if you just want to type your question, we can read them and then discuss your questions. Okay, so we have the first question here. It was an anonymous question. Thank you for the presentation. Can you say more about how the principle of separation of languages is defined and how it has changed? So this is the first question that we had here in the chat.
It has changed because separation of languages initially as a principle for Teletandem was that when students had the conversation in their L1, just their L1 had to be used, or at least the L1 had to be privileged. Because then research showed that actually students use more than one language. So we used to call this code switching, yeah? At the time, I remember that Laurie Anderson made a research on tandem. And when code switching was used in tandem, and it's natural, it's normal. People, languages are tools that we have and we use them. And sometimes we actually need to use them because they show our identity. And here we come again to another concept, a notion that I really love. That's the notion of translanguaging by Ofelia Garcia. That it's an alternative notion to the code switching idea that's more that gives more an external view of the change of language and how, and she says instead, and translanguage reflects more what people feel when they change the language. Sometimes using a language, a different language, reflect your psychological need, your identity. So in multilingual context, usually we talk about now about translanguaging. So translanguaging, using different languages, either you do it to be as an you do it for getting to a point, for conveying meaning. Either you do it because it's funny, but anyway you do it. So it's a misconception that people just communicate in one language. And I remember that my friends and my colleagues who are here know that sometimes I use dialect when I speak, because there are some expressions that that work better in that language. And dialect, although I don't speak it very often, it's part of my history, it's part of my identity. As for instance, in the initial questionnaire, show students joining IOTT. They show that actually they speak dialect. So IOTT, this plurilingual perspective, this emphasizing the richness of our repertoire, also takes students to show their competence in dialect that normally is not, people don't like to say that they speak dialect, because it doesn't have a positive, it doesn't give a positive image. So actually it's a way to ascribe value to all the languages we know, to all the varieties we know, to ascribe values. So going back to the notions, the notion changed because you don't have the idea that separation of languages, and in intercomprehension you don't have the separation of languages. When you use English as a lingua franca, you don't have the separation of languages, because you use English as the only vehicle for communication. And there are research, there is a lot in common between how communication in lingua franca works and how intercomprehension works.
Thank you, Paola. I guess Solange raised her hand. Do you have any comments or questions? No, Solange? Okay. I have a question here from Susie. Paola, are students always organized in pairs, and how are the transcription and analysis carried out with the help of the teacher?
The help of the teacher is when required. If they have problems in carrying out the analysis, they ask the teacher. I can't deserve much time during my lessons to people who follow the IOTT program. So if they want, they can talk to me, they can ask help, they can write, we can exchange ideas, and then during the oral exam, because in Italy the exams are oral, during the oral exams they make their analysis. Some of them, as Antonio did it, wrote it. Who transcribes? I see that in your question you are also asking who transcribes. Students who cannot be put in pairs because they already know all the they are all good in partners Romance language. So they are, because I'm teaching in a main course in which students study languages. So my partner university, in my partner university, all students are French speakers. So my students are, like now, they all study French. So we are going to make a call to ask who wants to join us. But sometimes we don't find partners. And so students who have this task do the transcription. That's anyway a good exercise for them, and make the analysis. So we have different perspectives. The perspective of the students who join the Teletandem session, and this perspective of the other student. Okay. Of other students who are joining the program. Did I answer, Susie? See, I have to, it's a kind of personal, individual mentoring, most of all, because in classroom, we can share this experience because other students have to study intercomprehension. So for them, it's very useful to know the experience that their colleagues did. Maybe I didn't say, but of course, this is an experiential approach to learning approach to teaching. They develop different skills. They learn by doing, Kolb and O'Dowd and Turula and Gura. These are all the theoretical foundations. So they learn by doing, but they don't learn the language, because my course is not it's a course in for teaching.
Okay, any other questions from, I have a question on the chat, but I guess João wants to say something. João?
Well, thank you, Maisa. Paola, I'm thinking a lot about the change of languages, the principle of Teletandem and tandem learning, of change of languages, and then it's nice that you sort of, you know, that this approach sort of breaks one, I would say, rule for the sake of learning one ability, right? So you have the reception ability, the comprehension ability, and no emphasis on the production ability. So there are different sessions. Yes. At the same time, I think it's very interesting. I'm thinking about intercomprehension even in one language nowadays, you know, how people can intercomprehend each other nowadays and the way that the world is going, right? So people are talking and there are, even in the same language, and there is no intercomprehension at the same time, right? You know, my question would be, how do you connect this thing? It makes me think of purposes first, right? My purpose is to know what you want to say, and we had an intercomprehension situation in the beginning of this conversation here, right? That you were Italian, we were speaking Portuguese, and I felt that you were paying attention to what we were, because it interests you at the same time, right? Can you explore this a little bit more in terms of the approach that you guys are taking and adopting for this?
Yes, it's similar to what happens also when we read in a way. The key word is approximation. Yeah? Encourage students to approximate meanings. Okay, so don't try to translate every word you hear. That's something people still do when they learn a foreign language. At least in Italy, in schools, you know, João, because you taught in Italy, and you probably have realized that still in schools, languages are taught, modern languages are taught as they are Latin or ancient Greek. Students, it's a translation, a grammatical, translational, and method. It's an old method. So students are not educated. They are not trained to understand and build meanings, trying to have a global, trying to understand the global meaning, and then you go inside the text and try to understand what actually it's inside the text. So you apply, they're not used to apply top-down strategies and then bottom-up strategies. They just stick to the text and try to understand word by word. So approximation is one strategy, and then you help them also to that's something actually that my students who don't have who are in an initial level of intercomprehension, as we saw, that you actually applied strategies of receptive, positive, good strategies for reception. And they actually, because probably they have, they study many languages, they have a good experience in years of experience with this language, but they showed also good interproductive skills. That's how Balboni calls them. The skills that you use to facilitate the comprehension of what I say or what you are saying, and that's something that really interests me. What people can do when they use a language they are expert in to be clearer, and to adapt what you're saying to the interlocutors' competencies, knowledges. to their interlocutors acting also, or participation in a conversation. That's what you were saying when you mentioned that we also have problems when we speak our own language.
Yes.
And it's a communication problem. So it's a way of it has different levels. There is a one that is political. Was it clear that in a way it was political? So it's political, it's interpersonal, it's social, yeah. And so we have to be inclusive. It's a global world. We have many people coming in our countries, and we have to be used to talk to them. Even if they can just say 3-4 words in Italian. They need to develop strategies to, sorry, to understand people's interlanguage.
And there is this need of the motivation to you must want to know what the other is saying at the same time, right, Paola?
Yes.
The curiosity in terms of what the other one is saying, right? Because if you don't want to know what the other one is saying, so there is no, you know,
Yeah.
The barrier really is.
It's an intercultural attitude, but we don't have to think of interculture as a national culture, no? We have, it's an interpersonal, intercultural, it's an attitude, it's a natural attitude that must be developed in this globalized world. It's political, it's strongly political. In a conference, during a conference 2 years ago in Lyon, I don't remember his name, it was an Argentinian politician, and he said this: can you imagine how strong we would be also politically if all the people who speak Romance languages could actually communicate among themselves without using English, okay? Because using a language gives power to those nations in which the language is the native language. Instead, this idea of Romanophania, there are so many people who speak Romance languages. There are so many people who speak Slavic languages, because I'm just talking about Romance family. The Familia Romance, but you can also, this works with Germanic languages and with Dutch and German. There have been so many projects going on about this, and I think that Teletandem it can meet intercomprehension very easily if we all share the idea that our education must be plurilingual and not just in one language.
Oh, can I say something about, I think the question, this issue of the principle is important. And I agree with you when you argue that intercomprehension is a model or an approach of Teletandem. And I was thinking that whenever people, researchers try to describe tandem or teletandem projects, they use bilingual. It's a bilingual form of telecollaboration. So, if we go back to Brammertz and researchers before Teletandem existed, they usually mentioned bilingualism as a way of describing the context. So I really think, and another thing, even with the proposal of the separation of languages principle, in practice, when we see our students talking during the oral session, we can see that, okay, they do try to separate, but there are many situations in which, many occasions during the conversation in which they use both languages at the same time. So what I'm trying to say is that intercomprehension is I don't know, for me, is a natural way of using what is inherent in Teletandem proposal. You know, it's inherent to have two people who speak different languages. So the bilingualism is constitutive. You know, Teletandem consists of two languages, of the encounter of two languages. And then I really don't think intercomprehension is a problem if you want to call it Teletandem, I don't think it is a problem. But I do think that you might need to explain this every time you present, right? And just about this mix of languages during conversations, I think Ana Salomon's student, master's student, defended a dissertation on this. She called it code switch at the time, but I think, I'm not sure, I saw a presentation they made at a conference last year, and it showed exactly this, that in many occasions during the conversation, they end up using both languages, and that's extremely important for effective communication and learning.
They even use a third language. Yes,
that's true. That's true. So just, just to let you know that I agree with you. And I think there are other arguments that could be used to explain why IOTT is Teletandem, because it's bilingual. And this is what Teletandem is normally defined as, a bilingual context. It doesn't mean that the languages should be separated, maybe.
It's it's a bilingual context. Okay, it's a bilingual context. What it changed is that mostly receptive skills are developed and partial competencies are developed in L2. Le competenze parziali, but these receptive skills, partial competence, do take you also to improve your listening skills in the language you study. So because you develop strategies that then you can use when you study other languages. And what is interesting is that if you start by just intercomprehension, you might want to go on and study that language. So intercomprehension has become interesting for people because people then decided to widen their language repertoire and know much more language. This is something that we like, because actually it's a way of, it's also a didactic approach to develop first receptive skills and then you speak. Maybe sometimes when we teach a foreign language, we want people just to talk from the very first day. We just want to communicate. Maybe in this way, it's just a way of teaching a second language more slowly.
And I think it is just to complete this idea, Susie, the idea of not switching and not speaking both languages in Teletandem came from the idea that if you keep just one language, you will start thinking in that language. That's why in Teletandem we had the one time for one language and then another time for the other language, right? So it's a matter of objective, I think. It would, because the production was also emphasized in Teletandem. That's why, you know, and but I still think that it's collaborative. I still think it's a tandem in this way, you know, but it's a matter of objective. I had a very typical intercomprehension example in my life when my American parents came to Brazil to meet my mother. My mother was a 5th grader, okay, and my American parents were monolingual from the interior of the United States. But you wouldn't believe that these people talking, and they were speaking in their own languages, and they laughed, and they did it. So and they sort of, it was why? Because there was such an interest in knowing the other, in getting in touch with the other, you know, that I just sat down. I could speak both languages, but I crossed my arms and they started talking in, you know, that was typical of intercomprehension. And the motivation of wanting to get into the other shoes, you know, it was very interesting.
I just want to thank Anna. Anna Salomon has just mentioned in the chat the reference or some more information about the student who worked with this code switching and the reconceptualization of the separation of languages principle. And I agree with João, it's still collaboration, there's still autonomy, but the point is people are going, and people do argue that it's not Teletandem because there is no separation of languages. I agree with you. It's a matter of objective, and also it's still bilingual. Because, you know, I think it's different from lingua franca. Of course, they're going to use all the languages they know, but the concept of and the organization of the context does not include the use of other languages. So that's why I think it's crucial, you know, to observe, like, Teletandem is bilingual. Teletandem proposes autonomy and collaboration, reciprocity. So this is what I
collaboration, reciprocity, and autonomous learning. But then let's not talk about that. Yeah,
Leila sent us a question here, and if we have time, I have one more question in the chat. So Leila is asking, let me just find the question. Do we in South America already use intercomprehension between Portuguese and Spanish? She says that Portuguese understands Spanish better and faster. And is it Spanish still the dominant language? So Leila is asking this
Where,
question.
Leila, exactly Spanish is the dominant language? Sorry, I don't understand. Portuguese understands Spanish better and faster, and is it Spanish still the dominant language? Where is Spanish the dominant language?
Do you mean in South America, Leila? Your microphone.
Yeah, in South America, yes.
In what do you mean? Where, in Argentina?
No, in South America. In South America. For example, we speak like, I don't know, the people that also teach Spanish in Brazil, because our languages are so similar. And then I teach Portuguese to Spanish speakers here in Miami.
Yes.
So then,
yes.
you know, and we understand Portuguese much faster than they understand. We understand Spanish much faster than they understand Portuguese. So I was wondering, how is the relationship between these two languages in South America? I mean, what is more
In
dominant?
South America, I don't know. I know something about the studies carried out in the middle of 90s when the first project Eurom 4, that is Eurom 4 with 4 languages, was carried out, and there was a kind of continuum that from and there was French, Spanish, French and Italian were in the extreme of the continuum, and then there was Portuguese and Spanish. This implied that Portuguese understood and that could understand better French speakers, Spanish could understand better Portuguese speaker, and Italian Spanish speaker. But I only know it in this direction. And and this research was carried out in receptive and written receptive skills, not oral skills.
I see. No, I was wondering because Portugal in Europe has a different geopolitical situation than Brazil in South America. So they are different, you know. So I was just wondering, and in the past 20 years, Brazil just, you know, emerged as a, you know, a little more powerful nation, you know, that speaks a different language. So I was wondering if this intercomprehension also deals with power, you know, notions of power, and really not in Europe, but in South America.
In South, unfortunately, I don't know that much about the situation in South America. I know people work there. Christian Vegas, he works in Brazil, and he moved from Grenoble, and now he works in Brazil. I know people works in that, but I don't. I'm sorry, I don't know how exactly to answer your question. What is the relation and intercomprehension in South America? But I will surely work on that and try to know more. But I don't know now how to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola. I'm sorry, but I would have another question here, but we don't have more time left because we have to open the other sessions. Thank you so much, Paola, for the wonderful talk. Thank you all for your participation. We have a 15-minute break now, and we'll be back in the session 7 and 8 at 10:30. Thank you so much. See you all. Bye-bye. I'm going to end the meeting.
I'm taking some of the questions you asked. So I'm copying the Leila question.